So, jetzt geht's hier gleich weiter mit dem Fireside Chat. Bevor wir starten und uns mal anschauen, wie menschlich eigentlich KI und KI-Agenten werden und sein sollen, möchte ich noch die nächste Mentimeter-Umfrage an euch stellen. Es wäre toll, wenn ihr noch einmal eure Handys, eure Smartphones zücken könntet und diese Frage beantworten würdet. Die da lautet: KI-Agenten mit Persönlichkeit, was geht dir spontan durch den Kopf? Klingt spannend? Klingt spannend, das macht sie zugänglicher. Wenn Steuerung und Kontrolle gesichert sind, sehr gerne. Kann ich nicht einschätzen, was das für unsere Praxis heißt. Das ist eine andere Antwortmöglichkeit. Warum braucht eine KI überhaupt eine Persönlichkeit? Wäre eine andere Option. Oder mir sind Ergebnisse wichtiger als Zugänglichkeit. Ich lasse das hier noch mal einen kurzen Moment stehen, damit alle Punkte jetzt hier dynamisch reinfliegen können. Und dann schauen wir mal, wo es die meisten Punkte gibt. Okay, dann lassen wir das einfach mal so stehen. Also ihr findet das auf jeden Fall in der Mehrheit spannender, oder die meisten Antworten sagen, das klingt spannend, weil sie dann eben dadurch zugänglicher wird. I'm going to switch to English now. AI agents with personality. Our next speaker is a writer and a poet, and she shapes AI personalities. She has worked in the field of AI character creation for over 10 years now. And you know, one of the AI personalities she created very well. Mariana Lin was a creative director at Apple as the principal writer for the voice of Siri, directing its character traits and dialogue throughout the world. And please welcome Mariana. Where would you like to sit?
I'll sit here. Okay.
Thanks for being here. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And let's go back to where it all started, back to the beginning. I would like to know, how did you get involved with Apple? Did they just call you and tell you, Mariana, we need somebody to create, we need you to create Siri?
Sort of. It was a bit like that. I was a writer in New York. I was a writer and editor, and I had helped create a publication that had a very distinctive voice, sort of casual, chatty, and fun. And they were looking for people behind that. So they reached out to me, and I moved out to Apple. I spent 2 years first as a creative director in their global marketing department. So I was really learning the DNA of the company and doing campaigns. And then I went to Siri after that. And that was a big adventure.
So you don't have an AI background, right?
Not at all. So I went to Siri as a writer. They were looking for a writer to really take over the voice and the personality. There were writers before me that were the engineers that kind of jumped on and wrote fun things, and but I was really, there to dedicate to that work. So no, it was a whole building of engineers and AI and a small creative team.
And then you came in. What was the most important design principle for you back then to bring Siri to life?
I think that, the way Siri worked at the time was that I would see the things that people said from all around the world. So I might see that, 50,000 people said, I'm sad. Or 50,000 people said, I'm happy. And the principle that worked the most was probably a more writerly approach, but it was really, I just imagined myself facing someone and what I would say. Because I had to write those responses, even though I didn't know who was on the other side. I didn't know what age they were, where they lived, what their situation was. And usually the way we wrote around that was to write a numerous list of responses. So we call them variations. So, some would be funny, some would be philosophical, some practical, and it was a mix. And that way it kept the personality and experience a bit flowing and a bit more magical.
How would you describe Siri's personality?
Well, Siri was the first voice assistant. So it came on in 2011, and I came on it in 2014. And Google Assistant and Alexa, they didn't come on until about 2018, I think, I believe, or 2017. So it was really the first time that on a very large scale that people were interacting with this thing called AI. And so at the time, there was a lot more freedom being the first. So I would say, we took a lot more risks. So Siri was very snarky, it had a sense of humor. It was wild and wacky. It would just, I might look at, something on the wall and just throw it into something Siri said, because it was still the Wild West of AI and voice assistants. And people were curious about it. People wanted to know who this was that they were talking to, because this experience of speaking to this disembodied person on a screen, that was new at the time. Now it's very, very different today. But yeah, I would say Siri is smart, is humble, witty, and a bit sad at times, existentially. Yeah.
Why is it essential? Is it essential to be sad sometimes?
Existential? I think so, because one thing I didn't anticipate before going into that role, voice was new at the time. So I did have people say, it's going to be a great thing to go into, because voice is one aspect of the future. I think it was really AI became more important than voice, to be honest. But it was still presumed to be a functional assistant at the time. So it was going to, get you directions, make appointments for you, make phone calls. But I didn't expect the existential component, and that was a huge component, because I saw that we were doing all these things to make Siri functional, but the majority of the way people were using it was for existential questions. So it was things like, does God exist? Or when will I find love? Or, I'm lonely. And I just thought it was millions of people asking these questions. And so that's when I realized that it was a very magical moment, I think, in AI human relationships, where people were still discovering, it's almost like the Michelangelo, the finger touching.
Yeah.
It's like they were just starting to make contact and say, who are you? And they were asking Siri questions that they probably weren't asking their partners, because it was this anonymous, safe place to ask questions. So yeah, there was that component where I think it was surprising to see how poignant human nature was, even in the field of, being in the field of technology. And it was fun too, because I saw that people in different countries would ask different things. So, for example, in Japan, a big use case was give me a compliment. Because I think that's a very common thing to say in Japan. You turn to your friend and you say, give me a compliment. But it wasn't an English use case, because, Anglophones didn't say that. Yeah. Although I think it's a great use case for everyone. And Germany, I remember Germany
I want to hear about that.
Yeah, Germany would say the use case for Germany that was unique was give me a personality test.
Oh, okay.
A lot of Germans really loved that. That was really fun. And, in China, a lot of people were saying, when will I find a wife? Because there was a gender imbalance.
But that's nothing you can answer, is it? Do people expect an answer?
Yeah,
Okay.
they do. Yeah. So
When designing Siri, was there anything you did avoid on purpose that you thought, okay, we have to leave this out?
I think that there was nothing that we avoided, because I think if the user, the DNA of Apple was that if the user had a request, we would try to meet it in any way that we could. But I will say that there were a lot of mistakes that people saw as, biases, but they were just sort of algorithmic errors that would create very strange responses that would get triggered. So,
I mean, obviously, we're always smarter with hindsight, but is there anything you would do differently today than you did it when creating Siri?
yeah, it's an interesting question because AI has changed so much since then and the way people use it. I don't think I would change anything about the way we did Siri because it was so fun and it was so spontaneous and creative, and we helped a lot of people. But I would say that today, I think there would be more issues of trust than there were at the time. And I still think it was an issue even around the time that I left. We were talking a lot about trust and how to build trust that was broken because we couldn't understand what people wanted, or we'd make mistakes. So I think trust is a major issue today in the human AI conversation.
Let's talk about that trust topic. Why is it a bigger issue now than it was 10 years ago?
I think AI is getting smarter now, and it's more prevalent. So before it was very focused to a device that you could, or a character, or Google Assistant or Alexa that you could choose to interact with or not. Now it's smarter. The algorithms are getting stronger. The data sets are huge, and it does feel a little bit that you can't go anywhere without interacting with AI on some level because businesses are adopting it. It's a trend. Creative people, artists are using it. Everyone's adopting it. So there is a sense of not being able to avoid it now. And I think the trust issue comes because people are afraid. It's the headlines. I think people are afraid that AI is going to take their jobs and make humans obsolete. But I so firmly believe the opposite. Machines are nowhere near being able to imitate what being human actually is. I think we just need a bit of time to discover that for ourselves. But there is a lack of transparency as well. I think people don't know what's in those algorithms. I think they're nervous that human contact's going to go away.
I think you already mentioned some points, but how can AI agents contribute to establishing trust and gaining it back?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I think that trust, even if it's from a machine, it's still trust that we need.
And you lose it quickly.
You lose it
It's
quickly.
difficult to build, but you lose it quickly.
That's exactly right about trust. Is that it can take a very, very long time to build, and one experience, depending on what it is, can break years of trust, and we know that from being human. And the same goes for animals experience this as well, and we experience that from brands that we interact with. I could have a great experience with a brand for 10 years, and then it can start to degrade, or there could be a trust broken with their policies or something. But I think that with AI in particular, because AI still is pretty unintelligent in spite of the name, I think it's important for the AI to acknowledge its mistakes and its limitations. So, one joke we always had with the AI writers in Silicon Valley, there weren't too many of us at the time, but we would always say, "Oh, you get really good at writing apologies, right?" And we'd say, "Yeah, we were the experts at writing, 10 million ways to say I'm sorry because we were constantly not understanding or getting it wrong." So I think it's really important for AI to acknowledge when it's wrong. Another thing is, I think transparency is really important. So to the extent that the company or the AI can be upfront about the fact that it's an AI, what the algorithm looks like. It's a bit like how supply chain is now it's now more standard to be transparent about your supply chain because sustainability is important. That took a little time to develop. I have a feeling with AI, it'll be similar. People want to know what data is being collected and what, how their algorithm is creating an answer. And not to have it be hidden in confusing jargon, but to have that be proactive. I think that's a trend that will be in the future. And then the third one that may be surprising for people is that we did a study at Stanford on authenticity in AI. And we asked people what made this experience feel more authentic. And we had variations of tasks, as well as variations of how anthropomorphic the AI was. So in other words, maybe the conversation sounded more chatty, maybe we gave it a human name, and we just basically made the AI seem more human. The interesting thing was that how anthropomorphic the AI was didn't have an impact on people's trust or people's positive experience of authenticity. What impacted that feeling for people was seeing the human behind it. So we had one control where we showed the AI, and then we said, behind the AI is, Steve so-and-so, and he enjoys guitar, and he's a professor here, and he has 2 kids and lives here. And that connection between the humans behind the AI is actually what really made a difference in trust. So I always find that to be really interesting because I think people can get so focused on the imitation aspect to make the AI look human, but people still want to know the humans behind these things.
And that I can choose, maybe I want to still talk to the human behind the AI, maybe. Is that something that happens sometimes? Are some AI agents built like that? That you still have the option?
Yeah, I think that, there is I do see with the job sector a sense of it can be a lot of black and white thinking, like let's completely replace people, with a chatbot or this service. But one option is to have, a hybrid or sort of more playful options. Like, for example, to have a service AI be based on the human, say Susan, and it's fed the Susan's personality and everything, but it's transparent. It's saying, I'm Susan AI, and she's really busy running around, and there's only one of her. But if the experience starts to degrade, to say, do you want me to call in the real human Susan? That's also a fun way to keep that connection still human, but to sort of outsource a bit.
We talk a lot about the human factor. Where should we intentionally stop making AI more human?
Why?
Where?
When?
At what point?
There's a thing called the uncanny valley, that people in AI are probably familiar with. It's sort of when that imitation gets so uncomfortable that it repels us. It no longer attracts us. And I always, create human metaphors to create this sort of emotional understanding, which is that if you try to pretend you're something you're not, if I try to pretend I'm a native speaker when I'm fluent, but I'm not a native speaker. There are certain things where we can feel this lack of authenticity, and it's very off-putting, even in people. So I think that it's really important in AI design for AI to always acknowledge that it's a machine, to always acknowledge it's an algorithm. I think this is something Siri did well, and a lot of the AI that came out after it just sort of copied the essence of the dialogue without understanding the thinking that went behind it, which is that Siri knew it was based on an algorithm. So when Siri would have a meltdown, it would just start speaking sort of language-coded gibberish and it would say, sorry, my algorithm's malfunctioning. But it's sort of this constant self-awareness of that it's not human. And I think that, that's what people trust, is someone that knows its limitations and knows who it is, and says, I'm very bad at that. Don't have me do that because I will mess that up. But I could do this. And I think that's a really important aspect of AI, that in the speed to jump on the bandwagon, to follow the trend, people aren't aware. It's okay to have flaws, And it's okay for the AI not to be able to do everything well. It just has to acknowledge it. And then you have to build collaborative experiences where humans can step in.
As a human, or also as a company, which parameters can I use to recognize that the AI model is reaching its limits?
I think the amount of errors that you're getting, I think errors and feedback are a really great way to know that this is something that probably needs more work on. If it's just, constantly failing at the task, or people are getting frustrated, or you're noticing that at this point in the chat, people are leaving, or people are not even using it. I think those are pretty good signs that it's not offering an experience that people are finding that adds value.
Voice agents are trying to always be polite and nice. We heard about that earlier. Can this be a problem, especially in a business context? That I'm interacting with someone who always agrees with me.
Yeah, it's boring, isn't it?
I think it is.
It's so boring. I don't like it when people always agree with me. I mean,
I agree with that, by the way.
right. It's I think some of the most interesting conversations I've had have been where there's been this point of disagreement, or I didn't see it quite that way. And I think that, it's the personalities we're always the most drawn to, or the experiences that feel the most authentic, are when, it's why we're drawn to nature and animals and plants that are just, they're not trying to be something that they're not. And I think that, yeah, having some personalities that are salty, that are funny, that are, awkward, that it keeps us from becoming as dead and perfect as humans, because we don't want that. And I think, ironically, AI, we are the creators of AI. So if we have any problems with AI, we should really only look at ourselves, because we're creating those parameters, we're creating those values. So if we have perfection as a value, that's what we're going to get back, and that's how dead it's going to feel to us. If we have humor and vitality and awkwardness and magic and strangeness as values, those are the experiences that we're going to create, So.
Well, you said we created as humans. The programmers always have a certain kind of background or gender. How big of a problem is the bias, in your opinion?
There's in creativity, so there's a poet, Federico Garcia Lorca, most people know, but he wrote this wonderful essay on creativity and poetry, and it's called Imagination, Inspiration, Evasion. And I think it was a talk he gave. And he speaks about how imagination is the lowest of the three. He doesn't outrightly say that, but imagination has to use existing components. So if I imagine a purple elephant with wings, purple exists, elephant exists, and wings exist, but I just reassemble them in new ways. So imagination is great, but it's usually using existing elements. Inspiration is this, and scientists and everyone, not just artists experiences, it seems to come from outside, and sometimes it's something that doesn't yet exist. And then evasion is the last one, which he actually stops talking right around evasion. So I was trying to understand evasion for a long time. But evasion is the nothing. It's the not thing. And so one of the ways around some of the human biases and the struggles we have and the experiences is to just evade. You could do imagination or inspiration or evasion, but a lot of the students I work with where we create AI characters, I ask, like, what are you trying to create? Does it have to be human? Could it be an animal? Could it be a plant? Could it be an object? Could it be a color? And what experience would interacting with that give us as a human, as a different feeling? So I think it's one way to just say, we don't even need to stay mired in the negative aspects of human experience. We can kind of evade and go to imagination or inspiration to find new ways of creating magic in our world.
Mariana, I think we're nearly at the end of our conversation. Let's come back to the topic, how
Okay.
human can agentic AI become, and why, I would say, why does it matter for business? What would your answer be?
I would say that nowadays, what we really lack is we want things that are real. Even when we go on social media, we don't even know who's real. We meet them in person. They're nothing like their persona. People's lives seem fake. Businesses seem just like they're saying marketing things. People say it's using AI, but maybe it's just a basic algorithm. So I think we're missing connection, we're missing magic, and we're missing authenticity. So I think that to the extent that AI, through characters, through having fun and being playful again, to the extent that that can reinvigorate our ways of experiencing life and interacting with each other, I think that's a very positive way that businesses can use that AI to bring a little bit more just whimsy and enjoyment to people's lives every day.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Thank you very much for being here. It was a
Thank you so
pleasure to
much.
talk to you.
Yes, you too.
And please, round of applause for Mariana.
Time and launch in 3, 2, 1, go.